Hello, students. Welcome to English online class. Our today's reading lesson is The Great Train Journey. This story is written by Ruskin Bond. Ruskin Bond was born in Kasauli in Himachal Pradesh in 1934. He has written many short stories, essays, novels, and books for children. He wrote his first novel, The Room on the Roof, when he was 17 years old. The story is about adventure of a young boy who travels in a train. Okay, let's read some difficult words. Concealed, it means hidden or covered up. Stationary, it means not moving. Shabby, it means curfy, old and worn away. Okay, let's start reading of the story. Sajid waved to a passing train and kept waving until only the spiraling smoke remained. He liked waving to trains. He wondered about the people in them and about where they were going and what it would be like there. And when the train had passed, leaving behind only the hot, empty track, Sajid was left alone. He was a little lonely now, his hands in his pockets. He wandered along the railway track, kicking at loose pebbles and sending them down the bank. Soon there were other tracks, a railway siding, and a stationary goods train. Sajid walked the length of the goods train. The carriage doors were closed and there were no windows. He couldn't see inside. He looked around to see if he was being observed, and then, satisfied that he was alone, began trying the doors. He was almost at the end of the train when a carriage door gave way to his thrust. It was dark inside the carriage. Sajid stood outside in the bright sunlight, peering into the darkness, trying to recognize bulky, shapeless objects. He stepped into the carriage and felt around. The objects were crates, and through the cross section of woodwork he felt straw. He opened the door, and the sun streamed into the compartment, driving out the musty darkness. Sajid sat down on a packing case, his chin cupped in his hands. The school was closed for summer holidays, and he had been wandering about all day and still did not know what to do with himself. The carriage was bare of any sort of glamour. Passing trains fascinated him. Moving trains, crowded trains, shrieking, panting trains all fascinated him. But this smelly, dark compartment filled him only with gloom and more loneliness. He did not really look gloomy or lonely. He looked fierce at times when he glared out at people from under his dark eyebrows. But otherwise, he usually wore a contented look, and no one could guess just how deep his thoughts were. Perhaps if he had company, some fun could be had in the carriage. If there had been a friend with him, someone like Umar. He looked at the crates. He was always curious about things that were bolted or nailed down or in some way concealed from him, things like parcels and locked rooms and carriage doors. and crates. He went from one crate to another, and soon his perseverance was rewarded. The cover of one hadn't been properly nailed down. Sajid got his fingers under the edge and raised up the lid. Absorbed in this operation, he did not notice the slight shudder that passed through the train. He plunged his hands into the straw and pulled out an apple. It was a dark, ruby red apple, and it lay in the dusty palm of Sajid's hand like some gigantic precious stone, smooth and round and glowing in the sunlight. Sajid looked up out of the doorway and thought he saw a tree walking past the train. He dropped the apple and stared. There was another tree and another, all walking past the door with increasing rapidity. Its rapidity. Sajid stepped forward but lost his balance and fell on his hands and knees. The floor beneath him was vibrating. The wheels were cluttering on the rails. The carriage was swaying. The trees were running now, swooping past the train, and the telegraph poles joined them in the crazy race. Crouching on his hands and knees, Sajid stared out of the open door and realized that the train was moving fast, moving away from his home and puffing into the unknown. He crept cautiously to the door and looked out. The ground seemed to rush away from the wheels. He couldn't jump. Was there, he wondered, any way of stopping the train? He worked around the compartment again. Only crates of apples. He would not starve. That was one consolation. He picked up the apple he had dropped and pulled a crate nearer to the doorway. Sitting down, he took a bite from the apple and stared out of the open door. "Greetings, friend," said a voice from behind, and Sajid spun round guiltily, his mouth full of apple. A dirty, bearded face was looking out at him from behind a pile of crates. The mouth was open in a wide grin. Hello," said Sajid apprehensively. "Who are you?" The man stepped out from behind the crates and confronted the boy. "I'll have one of those too," he said, pointing to the apple. Sajid gave the man an apple and stood his ground while the carriage rocked on the rails. The man took a step forward, lost his balance, and sat down on the floor. "And where are you going, friend?" he asked. "Have you ticket?" "No, Sajid. Have you?" The man pulled at his beard and mused upon the question but did not answer it. He took a bite from the apple and said, "No, I don't have a ticket, but I usually reserve this compartment for myself. This is the first time I've had company. Where are you going? Are you a hippie like me?" "I don't know," Sajid said. "Where does the train go?" The scrubby, ticketless traveler looked concerned for a moment and said, "Where do you want to go?" "I want to go everywhere," Sajid said. "I want to go to England and China and Africa and Greenland. I want to go all over the world." "Then you are on the right train," said the man. "This train goes everywhere. First, it will take you to the sea, and there you will have to get on a ship if you want to go to China." "How do I get on a ship?" asked Sajid. "Can you cook?" he asked. "Yes," said Sajid untruthfully. "Can you scrub a deck?" "Why not?" "Can you sail a ship?" "I can sail anything." "Then you will get to China," said the man. Sajid finished his apple, took another from the crate, and dug his teeth into it. He looked him he took aim with the core of the old apple and tried to hit a telegraph pole, but missed it by meters. It wasn't the same as throwing a cricket ball. Then, to make the apple more interesting, he began to take big bites to see if he could devour it in 3 mouthfuls. But it took him 4 bites to finish the apple, so he started on another. Sajid had always wanted to be in a train that would take him to strange new places over hundreds and hundreds of kilometers, and here was a train doing just that, and he wasn't quite sure if it was what he really wanted. The train was coming to a station. The engine whistled, slowed down. The number of railway lines increased, crossed, spread out in different directions. Before the train could come to a stop, Sajid's companion came to the door and jumped to the ground. You would better keep out of sight if you don't want to be caught, he warned, and waving his hand, he disappeared into the jungle across the railway tracks. The train was at siding, and Sajid could not see any signs of life, but he heard voices and the sound of carriage doors being opened and closed. He suspected that the apples wouldn't stay in the compartment much longer, so he stuffed one into each pocket and climbed onto a wooden rack in a corner. Presently, men's voices were heard in the doorway. Two laborers stepped into the compartment and began moving the crates towards the door, where they were taken over by the others. Soon the compartment was empty. Sajid waited until the men had gone away before coming down from the rack. After about 5 minutes, the train started again. It shunted up and down, then gathered speed and went rushing across the plain. Sajid felt a thrill of anticipation. Where would they be going now? He wondered what his parents would do when he failed to come home that night. They would think he had run away or been kidnapped or been involved in an accident. They would have the police out and there would be search parties. Sajid would be famous, the boy who disappeared. The train came out of the jungle and passed fields of sugar cane and villages of mud huts. Children shouted and waved to the train. Through there was no one in it except Sajid, the guard, and the engine driver. Sajid waved back. Usually he was in a field waving. Today he was actually on the train. He was beginning to enjoy the ride. The train would take him to a sea. There would be ships with funnels and ships with sails, and there might even be one to take him across the ocean to some distant land. He felt a bit sorry for his mother and father. They would miss him. They would believe he had been lost forever, but one day a fortune made. He would return home, and then nobody would care any more about school reports and what he ate and why he came home late. Umair would be waiting for him at the station, and Sajid would bring him back a present, an African lion, perhaps, or a transistor radio. But he wished Umair was with him now. He wished the ragged hippie was still with him, and adventure was always more fun when one had company. Okay, students, we will stop here for a while and we will think, where do you think the train will take Sajid? Will he see any new places? What comes into your mind? Yes, you have to think about it. He had finished both apples by the time the train showed signs of reaching another station. This time it seemed to be moving into the station itself, not just as siding. It passed a lot of signals and buildings and advertisement boards before slowing to a halt beside a wide, familiar platform. Sajid looked out of the door and caught sight of the board bearing the station's name. He was as astonished that he almost fell out of the compartment. He was back at his hometown. After traveling 40 or 50 miles, here he was home again. He couldn't understand it. The train hadn't turned, or that he was certain but it hadn't been moving backwards. He was certain of that too. He climbed out of the compartment and looked up and down the platform. Yes, the engine had changed ends. It was only the local Apple train. Sajid glowered and Sajid glowered angrily at everyone on the platform. It was as though the rest of the world had played a trick on him. He made his way to the waiting room and slipped into the street through the back door. He did not want a ticket collector asking him awkward questions. It had been a free ride, and with that he comforted himself. Shrugging his shoulders, Sajid sauntered down the road to the bazaar. Some day, he thought, he would take a train and really go somewhere, and he would buy a ticket just to make sure of getting there. I'm going everywhere, he said fiercely. I'm going everywhere, and no one can stop me. Students, I hope you like the reading of the story. In the next video, I will do question answers exercise for you, and you subscribe to this channel, and see you in the next video.